Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for part one of our three-part USDA Livestock Mandatory webinar series focusing on the pork and hog reports that USDA publishes. My name is Jody Pitcock, and I'm with the USDA Agriculture Marketing Service Livestock and Poultry Programs. I'll be your moderator this afternoon. This webinar series is part of an ongoing effort by AMS to collaborate with industry and academia in providing educational opportunities to stakeholders interested in programs and resources USDA makes available to pork producers. This afternoon's webinar is being recorded and will be available on the USDA website within the coming weeks. We'll provide you a link to that website at the end of our session, and participants will also receive a follow-up email with that information as well. Our speakers this evening will introduce you to AMS's Livestock Mandatory Reporting, or LMR, pork reports, and explain a bit about how information found in these reports can be used to manage risk. Also look at other valuable resources the pork producers can use, like the Swine Contract Library maintained by the USDA Packers and Stockyards Division, and the hog and pig livestock reports produced by National Ag Statistics Service. We estimate our session this afternoon to run about an hour and a half. As participants, you are in listening only mode, but you will have the opportunity to ask questions, and we'll answer those questions after each presentation and also at the conclusion of our session today. Please use the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your on your Zoom toolbar to submit your questions. Our speakers will answer as many questions as time will allow. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce our first speaker this afternoon. First speaker this afternoon is Mr. Neil Dierks. Mr. Dierks is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Pork Producers Council and is responsible for the overall implementation of all NPPC programs. He has served NPPC in several senior executive positions since 1990, before which he was the Special Activities Director for the Iowa Pork Producers Association and the Marketing Director for the Iowa Corn Promotion Board. Neil also currently serves on the Support of Agriculture Research Foundation Board of Directors and sits on the Executive Committee of the Charles Valentine Riley Memorial Foundation, an organization committed to promoting a broader and more complete understanding of agriculture with the vision of enhancing agriculture through scientific knowledge. He is also a recipient of Distinguished Service of Animal Science Award from the Animal Society of Animal Science. Neil grew up on a livestock farm in eastern Iowa and is a graduate of Iowa State University and remains involved in his family operations still today. Please welcome Mr. Neil Dierks.
Hello, I'm Neil Dierks. I'm the CEO of the National Pork Producers Council, and I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this webinar, in fact, this series of webinars. And I appreciate the fact that you're joining us for these webinars. These webinars are going to cover a number of issues, and I'm going to talk here shortly on the livestock price reporting elements of this information, but I also want to draw to your attention there are other resources that will be discussed during these webinars, including one will be by the National Ag Statistics Service, and it'll talk about the pig report, or the hogs and pigs report, which really isn't covered in mandatory price reporting, but is a vital element of our industry's information. And I would just put a plug in for those producers watching this, that please, if you get surveyed on the pig report, please fill it out and send it in. The surveys are only as good as the responses they get from producers, but I'll defer that to later in this webinar. You'll get an update on the National Ag Statistics Service. So I'm going to cover just a little bit of background as it relates to the mandatory price reporting. And first of all, how did we get here? And we got here because there had been an evolution in commerce in the pork industry on how commerce was conducted. And the marketing of animals in the pork industry had evolved. Initially, it was done through stockyards and auction markets in an open outcry system, and transitioned to more direct packer sales of hogs by producers. Now that evolution really started shortly after World War II, but accelerated in the 1980s. To the point by the time we were in the 1990s that there was volume of the reported animals were low, and it was all done on a voluntary basis without much participation. And it was pretty apparent that transparency was needed. More transparency was needed. So what happened was the MPPC, together with the beef and lamb industries, pursued what became known as the Livestock Reporting Act of 1999. Now, again, it has elements related to beef and lamb, but for purposes of this webinar, we're talking about pork. And the two main elements relating to the hog industry was that it required mandatory price reporting for live swine, and it also created a swine contract library under Packers and Stockyards Administration, which will also be touched upon in this webinar, and they can give you more details on that. But for purposes of my coverage, I'm going to talk more about price reporting. In this effort, the effort was to get USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service Market News Division to serve as a third party to provide information to be used by the entire industry, and particularly producers, and to increase the volume of that information significantly. In that act, the swine section was very prescriptive in terms of what and how the information was reported, and that was done through a series of committees of pork producers and others that sat down and said, okay, what do we want to make sure we get covered as we work on mandatory price reporting so there is transparency. The act also included the need for a reauthorization every 5 years because there was a recognition that the business changes over time, and it needs to have a regular interval of time to be able to make changes to the act, to keep it resilient as well as to keep it up to date and useful. And the act was also designed, as Dr. Steve Meyer often says, is to be a mirror as to what was happening in the marketplace. It was not, and it is not, a price discovery mechanism, which sometimes gets confused. Now, it does give us very timely and transparent market data, sometimes a few hours old, that is shared. And some producers and others have used it as a reference point. But unto itself, it is reporting of actual market prices that have occurred. The system requires, the law requires that purchase data is mandatory for any packer who on average harvests more than 100,000 head of swine in any given year. It is reported to AMS, the Agricultural Marketing Service, multiple times during the day. And AMS applies a high degree of confidentiality to this data, as well as takes a great deal of care in issuing reports that do not inadvertently share data that could give away a company or a producer's position in the marketplace. And I know this from now 2 decades of interface with AMS. That data is very secure, and they are very sensitive because they understand that data, if compromised, could be used in a wrong fashion. And that data is published in series reports, and that's going to be touched upon in this session. I think Lakisha Aller from Market News will be touching base on that, and she can do a much better job than I can. But I'll tell you that I look at the market reports many times during the day, just see what's going on. And as we work through these seminars, if you aren't familiar with it, I think you'll get a good handle about where to look and what the reports will say. Now, the Livestock Price Reporting Act of 1999 has been reauthorized since it was created several times. Sometimes it's had short-term extensions, like right now. At the time of this recording, the livestock price reporting is actually part of a continuing resolution of the government that runs till December 3rd of 2020. The hope is that it will be reauthorized into the future. It actually would have expired a year ago last September, but it was extended for a year. And now we're going through processes and we're waiting for a longer term reauthorization that goes forward with price reporting. In 2010, it was apparent and there was a desire by the industry that we needed to have wholesale pork cut reporting. And it went through a process. The government held what was called a negotiating rule process that came forward with mandatory wholesale pork price reporting, again, required. And it is used to this day and oftentimes is referred to as the cutout. Now, you're going to hear more about that in the future. There have been short periods of time where price reporting has been suspended during government shutdowns. I recall the longest was 17 days. It typically in our industry, in this country, you get a day where you might have, for instance, a holiday where the industry's working, but maybe the government's not, is on holiday. And the systems in the industry can make that work. But we start getting extended periods of time with no reporting. People's business gets affected and there's a lot of uncertainty and that leads to volatility. And also you're going to have during this series of webinars, you're going to hear from some other folks like the Chicago Mercantile Exchange that relies on a lot of these reports to settle their contracts. So the point being is we want to avoid shutdowns. In fact, one of the things we're asking for in this reauthorization is that our market news, livestock market news people are deemed essential during a government shutdown to make sure that reporting can continue. Now, the data from these reports that are published, and there's a lot of them, and Lakisha can cover it, and other people during other webinars can get down into a lot of details. But it's one of those things that's almost become second nature to the industry. It's just always there. And it's used. It's used for producers selling pigs. It's used for packers buying pigs. It's used for customers buying pork from packers and processors, and for packers and processors selling pork. And as I said, it's also part of this information used as a component in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Lean Index, as well as other risk management products outside of the Chicago Mercantile. I have to admit, and I'll tell you the input I get very often is that this is unique in swine and pork industries throughout the world. I have many of my colleagues in other parts of the world remind me of how important and how significant such a service is because their industries don't have anything like mandatory price reporting, and thus their industry oftentimes is flying in the dark, as it were. And our systems offers information for decision makers throughout our industry. And as I said earlier, the AMS Livestock News staff takes very seriously the accuracy and the confidentiality and the responsibility they hold with that. And I'll tell you, they do an exemplary job. There are not a lot of market reporters. There's enough to be a little redundant, but it's not like there's casts of thousands of people. And they work very hard on making sure that what is done is accurate. And sometimes, if you're familiar with reports, you'll know that some reports are delayed because of a technical glitch somewhere. But all in all, they're very attentive to making sure good quality reports get put forth. So this set of webinars is a starting point for further understanding and use from my perspective of these swine and pork market reports, as well as other information. And that will be going forward in the future, in future webinars. And as I said, we're going to hear a little bit in a period of time about the National Agricultural Statistics Services pig report, which is critical. We'll also hear from the Green Inspection Packers and Stockyards Administration about the contract library that was created in the Marketing Act of '99. And then we'll have more details on mandatory swine pork price reporting, and we'll go from there. And with that, Jody, I will turn it back to you and take any questions you have. Thank you.
We'll let Neil join us, and then we'll have a couple of questions. Neil, I want to thank you for that overview and some of that history of how livestock mandatory reporting started, 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago. I know there was a lot of work that was done prior to 99, and MPPC and yourself were very involved in that. And so we appreciate that. One of the things that it come up, and you'd mentioned about the reauthorization and extending it. What risk exists should LMR not be reauthorized or extended?
Well, thanks, Jody. And yes, just a side note, I misspoke there because I said 2020 extension. Actually, it's till December 3rd of 2021.
2021, yes.
For continuing resolution. And it's had a long, arduous process the last year and a half, because technically it should have been redone a year ago this past September. All that being said, as I put forth, the issue becomes if it's not reauthorized, as we have seen in the past, and there have been different kinds of strategies taken. In fact, we just went through one about a week and a half ago, where there had been an effort by AMS that if it was going to expire, that they would convert to a voluntary system. Now, we've done that in the past a couple times where there had been a shutdown, and it worked in a couple of situations, and in some others it didn't. That's also dictated with one of the things I talked about that we're trying to get put into mandatory press reporting. That's the issue that this be declared an essential activity of the government. So the real danger here is that we start getting less information, less frequent information. And as I saw in 2013, we had a shutdown. We went 17 days. And I know from the phone calls we got of people asking for what was available, it was literally shut down. The staff was not essential, and people just were flying without that information source. And as I said, this has become so common to the industry that a lot of people maybe don't realize how critical it is. Now, I will tell you, we had a shutdown during the Trump administration. The Trump administration declared that it was essential, and reporting continued on just as it had been. So that's the danger, the void of information. The void of information obviously impacts people's operations. That's the biggest concern.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like this world we thrive on information, right? And the lack of it can really keep us in the dark sometimes, and prevent us from making the right choices. So with that being said, so right now we're under a short-term extension, and rather than a full 5-year reauthorization, does that hinder the ability to improve the program? Because I see that in 2010 they added pork wholesale cuts. So when LMR first started, it was just the live hogs. We made that program improvement and added the wholesale pork. Yeah. So is that hindered, or can those changes or improvements to the program be made during that time?
Well, as I said, the Act of 1999 in the pork industry was very prescriptive, and it mandated what should happen by law, and it mandated everything into how the prices are reported by category, etc., how often they're collected and the information is collected, et cetera, et cetera. And with that, the livestock marketing news staff has limited flexibility to kind of jerry rig something to work. Now the danger becomes, and we've had a year and 2 month, a year and a month extension right now. So it isn't critical. We'll see how long if we actually get a reauthorization or we get another 1 year extension. NPPC has been working on this year's what should have been this year's reauthorization for the past 3 years. And it works with our producers committees, our industry committees, our producer board members, et cetera, to outline what items should be improved. If there's a full-blown reauthorization, then there will be an opportunity to make improvements. For instance, some of those improvements would be, as I stated earlier, make this essential information. But there are other improvements that have been identified over time that would help give context to information. One of which is we have a thing called non-carcass premiums that are published weekly by AMS. And it just serves to common sense that if you're going to have premiums, there probably should be discounts. And if we could get those reported also, there'd be more information available to the industry. In addition to that, NPPC's desire called swine pork market formula, priced off of a market formula, which would be, for instance, priced off the meat report. So there are changes we like to see. There's limited flexibility for AMS to make changes to jerry rig things. One of the things they did do, however, and this wasn't jerry rigging, there had been a call originally that we wanted to see carcasses reported. AMS had the flexibility to require carcass be reported. So that took off one of the options we were looking at for changes. So that's just a little flavor of this, but it does hinder if all these short-term reauthorizations, if they go on long enough, there's a danger that we might have some things that we all know are happening in the marketplace that need some transparency, but won't be able to be reported. But I'm optimistic we're going to get a reauthorization, and that as things sit today, they're workable.
Okay. Well, Neil, I sure appreciate your explanation regarding the reauthorization and improvements. We'll have some questions that'll come through and for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and move on to our second speaker. And then at the end, we'll have a live Q&A with all the speakers. So if any questions that come through the Q&A, we'll answer them at that time. So Neil, I sure appreciate your time and your knowledge, and appreciate your willingness to share that with us today.
Thanks for having me on, Jody.
All right. So now I'd like to introduce our second speaker this afternoon. Travis Averill is the chief of the livestock branch of the USDA National Ag Statistics Service division. Prior to his current role, Travis served as the deputy regional director for the Pacific region office in Sacramento, California. Travis previously held the role as the national cattle statistician and dairy products price statistician in Washington, D.C., along with the statistician in the Delaware, Maryland field office of Annapolis, Maryland, and New England field office in Concord, New Hampshire. So please welcome Travis as he gives you a walkthrough of the quarterly pig and swine report.
Hello, I'd like to thank AMS and staff for the opportunity to present on behalf of NASS. I'm Travis Averill, Livestock Branch Chief in the Statistics Division of USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service. I'll be providing an overview of the NASS Quarterly Hogs and Pigs Report. Today's overview of the presentation. First, I will discuss sampling and data collection. Next, we will be weighting and summarization of their data, followed by administrative data and how NASS incorporates the data in the quarterly process. I will cover the revision process for hogs and pigs, provide an overview of the balance sheet on a quarterly basis to monitor the supply and disposition components of the report. Next is an illustration of trade expectations, then the importance of Census of Agriculture. The last item I'll share with everyone is how to retrieve data from a quarterly report from QuickStats database. Here's a map of the United States by each state's classification in the hogs and pigs program. There are 3 groupings for the 50 states and labeled in the bottom right-hand corner. The first is the darkest shade, represents the 16 states that are published each quarter. The middle shade or the non-published quarterly states are surveyed every quarter but only published in the December release. The third is the lightest shade, represents the states that are surveyed only in December. This is a map by the number of samples for each state in the September 2021 quarterly hogs and pig survey. Data was gathered from a random sample of approximately 4,800 US producers of varying sizes, though large operations were sampled more heavily. Just for reference, last December, the sample size was roughly 6,000 in the 50 state survey. A brief note on sampling: hog owners, including contractors, are the target population. The sampling universe for the hogs and pig estimation program is all hog operations with the capacity to raise breeding or market hogs. A sample of hog operations from the list frame maintained by NASS is supplemented by a sample of area tracts to ensure complete coverage. Hog operations who own hogs in more than one state report inventory by state, so the hogs and pigs are allocated to the proper state where the hogs are raised. NASS data collection methods are typically broken into 4 categories: mail, internet, personal interview, which is face-to-face, and telephone. However, since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, no personal interviews have been conducted. Typically, the quarterly survey data collection period is completed within a 2-week period of time. On this slide, showing the questionnaire, I have provided some of the questions asked on the quarterly survey for hog producers. I have 3 areas of focus on the questionnaire highlighted as I'd like to draw your attention to. The first question is, how many sows and gilts were owned by this operation on the reference date being surveyed? That is followed by how many sows are expected to farrow during the next 3 months and over the next 6 months in the item B here. The next set of highlighted questions ask hog producers to break down their hogs and pigs for market inventory by weight group. There are 4 weight groups: under 50 pounds, 50 to 119 pounds, 120 to 179 pounds, and those that are 180 pounds and over. The last item of focus I want to discuss this afternoon is the questions asking for the pig crop from the last quarter for each of the respective 3 months in that given quarter, owned by the operation, and the second item is sold or slaughtered before the reference period. Operations are assigned a base survey weight that corresponds to their probability of selection. Large operations in each state have a determined threshold where an operation above a certain inventory level are all sampled and assigned a sample weight of 1, where those that are smaller in size will have varying weights as equal to 1 or greater. Once data collection is completed and all regional field offices have had a chance to review the data, a national summary is ran. After the summary is completed and finalized, regional field offices make recommendations and provide comments based on their survey indications at the respective state level. which then are sent into headquarters and we conduct a board. Administrative data. In addition to survey data from the quarterly hog survey, NASS also makes use of the administrative data from the following sources when setting quarterly estimates. The first source listed is USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service, Market News, where swine import data from AMS is used for inventory purposes. And to the right here, I have a graph illustrating the last 5 years of Canadian imports by quarter for feeder and slaughter hog imports. As you can see in the graph, in 2021, Canadian imports are up in comparisons with the other 4 years of data illustrated. And most of that is contributed, as you can see, the darker blue are the slaughter hogs, and that's driving the total imports coming in from Canada in 2021. NASS also incorporates additional import and export data from USDA's Foreign Ag Services, FAS, which is used in similar manner as AMS's import and export data for inventory purposes. USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service, FSIS, is used as NASS reviews slaughter data to revise total market hogs and weight groups from previous quarters. The last item here for administrative data that NASS incorporates is the State Departments of Agriculture, where data from each state is used for in-shipment and out-shipment data when reviewing each state's balance sheet. Every quarter, NASS has opportunity to revisit and revise estimates from the previous quarters. To improve the quarter-to-quarter relationships, the table on this slide is an example of the revisions made during the most recent quarter of September 2021. In December, NASS can make changes going back 8 quarters or a total of 2 years, whereas in the other 3 quarters, that's reference of March, June, and September, NASS can make revisions going back 4 quarters or a total of 1 year for each of those quarters. Revisions are made when new administrative data becomes available, mainly in the form of slaughter data. It is also worth noting that after the Census of Agriculture, NASS will review all estimates and can revise the previous 5 years. Here's an outline of the balance sheet for hogs and pigs when used when estimating the residual of hog inventory. As we have the total supply at the top with the previous quarter's beginning inventory, we add in the pig crop for that current quarter along with the imports, and that provides a total disposition, the total supply for that quarter. Then the total disposition is equal to the commercial slaughter minus your farm slaughter, death loss, and exports of hogs. And then the indicated inventory difference between total supply and total disposition should be very close to the estimated inventory for each quarter. The difference between the two values is referred to as the residual. As I've provided through today's presentation, the quarterly hogs and pigs report provides inventory data by class for breeding herd and market hogs. In addition, the market hog inventory are broken out into 4 weight categories. Each report provides the current quarter sow's farrow for the respective quarter, along with the farrow intentions for the next 3 and 6 months. The pig crop is provided on a monthly and quarterly basis. The last item listed on the slide is pigs per litter, which accounts the live saved pigs from the sows from producers surveyed in the report. Data is collected from the 28 largest hog producing states each quarter and from every state in the December quarter report. Each quarter, NASS compares their estimates with expectations from Router's survey of analysts. The analysts provide their estimates and ranges for the current quarter versus the previous year. In this graph from June 2021, the trade ranges are gray, the trade averages are the black circles, and NASS estimates are the red squares. And here is just a highlight of some of the trade expectation analyst values. They also provided additional items, but I'm just providing an overview of what some of the items are they share. It is worth mentioning that the Census of Agriculture is the primary source of county level data for hog inventory in the United States. The pictured graph displays hog inventory on a more granular level, with each dot representing 20,000 hogs. The most recent census of agriculture was completed in 2017, and the next one will be mailed December 2022, which will be asking producers for 2022 annual data along with the December 31st, 2022 inventory data. The 2022 Census of Agriculture will be released in early 2024. The last item I want to cover in today's presentation is how to access data from NASA's QuickStats database. As I have here a snapshot of the website, a user will need to go through the various steps to retrieve the data. For example, I want to share the steps for accessing the data for quarterly hogs and pigs report. First, you can see here is the program. You would want to select survey, and sector will be animal and products. Group will be livestock. Commodity is hogs. And there's 4 categories that show up here in categories. That's farrowed, inventory, litter rate, and pig crop. However, for the data item, there are 10 items that would have to be selected. Unfortunately, on the view here today, I'm only able to show 4 of them. That's the hog inventory, the litter rate, pig crop, and the breed and inventory. In addition to those 4, there's 6 others. The market inventory, those 4 weight groups I discussed earlier, and the sows farrow. Next, the domain, you'd want to choose total. And then down at the geographic level, you'd want to select national and the state level. Depending on if you want just the US value, you can just select the national. And if you want state level data, you also have to click state too. And for those points that need more than 1 item, you want to hold down the control button on your keyboard and select those other ones in addition to keep it able to select more than 1 category. And I have selected years 2021 and 2020. Period in time, you'd want to choose monthly and point in time. And then you really don't need to, unless you're going for a certain period of time, you would not actually need to highlight any of the periods associated here in the box to where the cursor is at this time. Once you have done that and click the Get Data function button, you have some choices how you want to view or save the data in QuickStats, as there are 4 options to choose from. Save, you can save the file. That's the first option. Spreadsheet, open in a CSV file, print, or create a map. The create a map which will allow you to view the data in a map concept based on the data items selected, and it will be the average based on the time period. Also, the URL is unique to the query. So if you save the URL, you can actually retrieve the data later or share that with someone that might need the same data without sending the files, depending on how they want to access the data, what they want to do with the data. Thank you again. My contact information is shared here with you today.
Well, thank you, Travis. I really appreciate you walking us through the quarterly pig report. You know, this information is very helpful to pork producers out there. And one of the questions that I have is, you know, as a producer, you know, how can I use that information to help me make, you know, marketing decisions in my own operation?
The data from the quarterly hogs and pigs report can be used directly or indirectly to help a producer, either by allowing them to make business decisions based off of the volume of hogs that are currently out there in the United States. And also it can be used to help them for programs. It's also
Travis, I think we might have froze up a little bit. Looks like Travis is froze up, so we'll go back to him here in a few, towards the end of at the end, and answer any questions or ask questions that may come up. So we will continue to move on, and go from there. Okay. All right. So John's going to go ahead and bring up the next speaker. So we'll go back to Travis' question. It sounds like it looked like his internet might have froze up there a little bit. So yeah, that happens in today's world. Everything's virtual and we're reliant on that internet and service. So to the third speaker this afternoon comes to us from the Packers and Stockyards service or division. And so prior to joining USDA in 2017, Jennifer Hopes served our country as part of the U.S. Navy. Jennifer, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for your service. Jennifer is the marketing specialist and the Swine Contract Library coordinator for the USDA Agriculture Marketing Service Packers and Stockyards Division. Thank you for joining us today, Jennifer, and we look forward to your presentation.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Hopes, and I am a marketing specialist and the Swine Contract Library coordinator with USDA Packers and Stockyards Division in the Midwest Regional Office. Joining me today at the end of the presentation for your questions is Gary May, Supervisor of Business Practices Unit here in the Midwest Regional Office. Today, we are going to be talking about the Swine Contract Library. A little background about the Swine Contract Library. The Swine Contract Library is part of the Livestock Mandatory Price Reporting Act of 1999. The Livestock Mandatory Price Reporting Act requires that AMS establish and maintain a library of swine marketing contracts. Congress intended the Swine Contract Library to aid in the price discovery process and provide equal access market information for all market participants. The SCL uses a web-based system to facilitate secure, real-time data from swine packers and data accessed by the public. The SCL regulation requires large packers to file swine marketing or purchase contracts, written and verbal, and monthly reports about expected swine deliveries under contract. The SCL was first published in August 2003. So who provides information to the Swine Contract Library? The SCL contains information from approximately 83 packers and 61 plants. We expect the overall number of plants and packers to remain relatively constant. However, the specific packers required to report will vary. These variations will depend on validation and construction in the industry. These packers account for approximately 95% of the U.S. federally inspected swine slaughter. Firms reporting have swine contracts, such as any agreement, whether written or verbal, between a packer and producer for the purchase of swine for slaughter, except a negotiated purchase. The SCL includes information from swine packers that either 1, purchase at least 100,000 swine per year and slaughter swine at federally inspected swine processing plants that slaughter at least 100,000 swine per year for the immediately preceding 5 years, or have the capacity to slaughter at least 100,000 per year, or 2, purchase an average of at least 200,000 sows, boars, or any combination thereof at one or more federally inspected swine processing plants during the immediately preceding 5 calendar years, with the average based on those periods in which the plant slaughtered swine. What information is available from the SCL? Information released by the SCL is provided in a contract summary report and a monthly report. Contract summary reports provide information on the various terms and provisions from the marketing contracts. This information includes the determination of base price and how base price is set, the premium and discount adjustments to the base price as determined by carcass and non-carcass traits, application of ledger where terms define the use of ledger or accrual accounts, and all other remaining terms and provisions from the contract. Monthly reports provide packers estimated swine purchases under marketing contracts for the next 6 and 12 months. The SCL has 5 reporting regions: Iowa and Minnesota, the Eastern Corn Belt, which consists of states east of the Mississippi River, the Western Corn Belt, which consists of South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, and Minnesota, the Western United States, which consists of the Western Corn Belt and states west of the Mississippi River, the National, which consists of all states and regions. So what information can be released in the Swine Contract Library? The reporting requirement under subsection A and B of the Packers and Stockyards Act shall be subject to the confidentiality protections provided under section 251 of the Agriculture Marketing Act of 1946. Packers and Stockyards Division releases monthly data reports if the information is from 3 or more firms and no single firm has a significant market share in the reporting region. However, Packers and Stockyards Division will not release confidential or proprietary information or identify the parties to the contract. The contract language and particular phraseology is considered proprietary business information. That is why, along with the possibility that the particular language would disclose the identity of the party to a contract, the contracts are not made available verbatim or simply redacted in the Swine Contract Library. The monthly reports. Monthly reports provide packers estimated swine purchases under marketing contracts for the next 6 and 12 months. The SCL reports are organized and released by contract type and region. There are 3 contract types: swine or pork market formula. This is a formula price based on a market for swine, pork, or pork product. Other market formula. This is a formula price based on any market other than the market for swine, pork, or a pork product. Other purchase arrangements. This occurs when a swine or pork market formula or other market formula is not used. For example, a fixed price contract, cost of production contract, or formula purchases with a floor, window, or ceiling price. What existing or available contracts are provided? The Packers and Stockyards Division receives example contracts from packers and extracts these payment provisions unique to each contract. PSD releases the different payment provisions from submitted example contracts by region and contract type on its website. PSD also extracts other contract provisions and provides as much of this information as possible under the law's confidentiality requirements. Producers have the ability to see contract terms, including base price determination formulas, carcass merit premium and discount schedules, and non-carcass premiums and discounts. Information regarding packers' expected contract purchases is also posted. How does the information from the SCL help producers? Producers may use the SCL to investigate what contract terms packers offer. A producer could identify contract provisions of interest. Producers would not know which packers are offering any of the provisions listed in the summarized information, nor would they know how a packer would combine those provisions in any contract. However, it is valuable to know that those provisions exist in the marketplace. A producer could use that knowledge to negotiate what may result in a more favorable contract with a packer. Producers may use the monthly report on swine contracted for future delivery in several ways. A producer may use this report to decide how many sows to breed. A producer may also use it to decide whether to contract with packers in regions where packers had fewer numbers of swine committed for delivery. So what doesn't the Swine Contract Library do? The SCL does not include information on swine production contracts. It does not publish full verbatim contracts, whether redacted or unredacted. It does not disclose verbatim other provisions. Any terms or wording that could potentially identify a party to the contract are replaced with more generic terms. The SCL also does not publish volume information associated with contract, price formula, or contract terms. This concludes my presentation for today. Thank you for joining me, and I will now turn it over to our moderator.
All right, Jennifer, I sure appreciate it. And if Jennifer and Gary could join us, we'll go into some Q&A. First off, I'd like to introduce Gary May. Gary will be assisting us this afternoon to field any questions regarding Packers and Stockyard regulations. Gary is the Business Practice Unit Supervisor at the Midwest Region Office of the Packers and Stockyards program in Des Moines, Iowa. He has been with USDA for over 18 years, an economist and senior marketing specialist. And prior to USDA, he was an extension livestock market economist, at Iowa State University. So Jennifer, I sure appreciate your presentation and walking us through that. Gary, thank you for joining us. You know, one of the questions that come up that is that I see is, are the volumes, are they collected from the individual contracts?
The answer to that is no. We don't collect any volume information associated with a specific contract or a specific price formula or, you know, a specific category. So unfortunately, we can't provide any volume information that goes along with those attributes of the contract.
So with the, so volumes in is only reported on the livestock, poultry, and grain market news reports, and not your reports as well.
That's correct.
Okay. So if a producer wanted a particular contract, if they wanted a particular contract from, how would they find out which packer was offering that particular contract?
Well, unfortunately, the confidentiality, you know, regulations that we are operating under, we can't disclose that. A packer might identify what's out there, but they would have to resort to their own, you know, their own network and resources to find out who that was, if that's what their interest was.
So they would have to work with that packer, with the packers individually, and to
correct,
determine,
or you know, through their own network of supplier, and you know, to get that information on who that packer even was.
Okay. Well, I sure appreciate you both taking the time, and for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and move to our last speaker this afternoon, but we'll have you join us here at the end in case any more questions come up. So Jennifer and Gary, thank you for joining us. So our final speaker this afternoon will be Lakisha Aller. Had the great pleasure of working with Lakisha for several years, and Lakisha is the assistant field chief with the Livestock, Poultry, and Grain Market News Office in Des Moines, Iowa. She has been with USDA for over 20 years, filling a variety of roles, supporting market reporting for hogs, pork, poultry, and eggs. Lakisha is a graduate of Iowa State University in Ames. So let's have look, see, and hear what Keisha has to talk about.
Thanks for
on
that
livestock
introduction, Jody, and thank you for having me here. Today, I'm going to give a broad view of what we do at Market News and how we do it, as well as elaborate on the role that we play in the marketplace. In addition, I'm going to talk about some of the reports and services that we provide, as well as where to find everything. Market News' mission is to provide timely, accurate, and unbiased market information to customers like yourselves to help you make more informed business decisions and to ultimately foster a more competitive marketplace. Market News publishes about 1,000 different commodity reports each week that include livestock mandatory reporting, hogs, and pork, where we provide valuable, transparent market information on price trends, supply and demand, and various purchase and sales methods used. Our role in the marketplace is to act as a mirror, in that we are supposed to reflect what's happening in the marketplace at one given moment in time. We provide free, unbiased information, and we leave the forecasting and projections to our sisters at the Office of the Chief Economist and the Economic Research Service, as well as industry. The largest packers of pork, beef, and lamb, meeting specific commodity thresholds, are required to report information to AMS each day to supply the data needed to produce the livestock mandatory reporting reports. Covered packers are required to submit all of their livestock purchase transactions and wholesale meat sales transactions on a daily and weekly basis. This includes all purchases from and within the US, Canada, and Mexico, with the exception of auction purchases, as these are not included in LMR. In addition, domestic and export sales of pork, beef, and lamb are included. Packers use a standardized form with reporting fields and requirements such as lot ID, base price, net price, FOB plant price, purchase or sales type, refrigeration type, delivery period, destination, and various others to submit their data. Since the inception of LMR, which was in 2001 for swine and 2013 for pork, packers that are annually slaughtering or processing an average of 100,000 barrows and gilts or 200,000 sows and boars or a combination thereof are required to report. Currently, there are about 55 plants that report their hog purchase transactions and pork sales transactions on a daily basis. Reporters located across the country, though mostly in the Des Moines, Iowa office, review between 7,000 to 11,000 hog records and 8,000 to 10,000 pork records each day. This information is then used to publish 25 daily and weekly hog and pork reports. LMR captures about 96% of the hog and pork marketplace. It is our job to protect participant information, whether you want us to or not. Under the Agricultural Marketing Act of 1946, the USDA is required to protect company identities and proprietary information. To do this, we use several different processes and systems that are more detailed and outlined online if you're interested in looking at that. However, livestock mandatory reporting also uses what's called the 37020 Confidentiality Guideline, where all the data must meet all of the criteria. 3 reporting companies must provide data at least 50% of the time over a 60-day period. Typically, on a day-to-day reporting basis, this is usually where the data will fail confidentiality and not report. 70, this portion allows for a maximum of 70% of the data to originate from one plant. However, if the company has more than 70% over the 60-day period of time, the data fails confidentiality and does not report. This is the second most common data fail. And 20, this element ensures that no one particular buyer or seller would be the only participant for more than 20% of the time. All of our hog and pork information and data is available online in many different places. And we are always here to help you find whatever it is that you're looking for. And with that, I'm going to go through some of these different websites with you. The first link that was on that slide was to our homepage. And here you can access all of the other links that I already shared with you. Those just happen to be direct links to make your lives easier so you can bookmark them or get them more quickly. If you scroll down, the first thing I'm going to point out is the reference room. And we're going to click on that. Right at the top is our reporter's handbook. Here you can find more information about our reporting procedures and processes, how we handle the information, records, management, confidentiality, as well as the different standards for all the different commodities. Glossary of terms. This is just as it sounds. If you're looking for more clarity on a specific word or meaning, that's where you're going to go. If you keep scrolling, you're going to see reports and report overviews. Here you're going to find several different educational documents and overviews for lots of different commodity reports. The three that I'm going to point out, though, there's 2 pork reports. There's a user's guide to our LMR pork reports, as well as a user's guide to the pork carcass cutout, which goes through the calculations in more detail and the yields that change each year. Also, there's the user's guide to the LMR hog price reports. If you keep scrolling down, you're going to see customer notifications. Anytime we make a change to a report, or we create a new report, or do anything at all to our reports, we usually send out some kind of notification to industry, and that's usually a notice to trade notification or a gov delivery announcement. And here you're going to find several of the ones that we've sent here recently. And if you're looking for a change that happened in the last several years, this is where you're going to go for more information. Lastly, you're going to see some presentation slides for all the various different mandatory conferences that we've had or discussions we've had over the years, in addition to other presentations too that include voluntary. But let's go back to the home page and we'll go find some reports. So we're going to scroll down to reports by commodity, and we're going to go look at some hog reports, where you're going to go to swine. I'm going to click on that. We're going to scroll down. Before we get to the mandatory reports, I want to point out some important reports here up at the top. First is the National Daily Hog and Pork Summary Report. This is a combination of mandatory and voluntary information from several different reports with many important data sets that are used by industry all the time. This is heavily used by industry. Also, I'm going to point out our actual and estimated livestock slaughter reports under federal inspection. Mandatory reporting only covers 96% of all federal inspection, whereas this covers all of it. But let's go look at some mandatory data, which is under the swine direct reports. I'm going to scroll down. Here's that nice little user's guide link in case you couldn't find it before. Under national slaughter is where you're going to find all of our mandatory hog reports. So if you're looking for the daily prior day purchase report, or maybe the daily prior day slaughter report, you've got your morning and afternoon purchase reports, as well as sow and boar and various other reports. If you get to regional slaughter, the weekly average weight of barrels and gilts report is all mandatory data, and it's somewhat similar to this Iowa Southern Minnesota, except for it's more expansive. And then you've got some national feeder pig data as well. These markets also pair with the mandatory data. Let's go back to the home page and find some pork reports. Under the commodity section, you're going to look for meat, and it's going to take you to a subset of this web page. You're going to see daily and weekly pork reports, and we're going to click on daily. Scroll down. Again, link to the hog and pork summary, as well as those overviews that are very helpful. We've got 2 daily negotiated pork reports. There's a morning and an afternoon. With pork, we have 2 different pricing series. We have FOB Plant and FOB Omaha, so it winds up being 4 different reports. Also on this page, you're going to see some voluntary reports that tie in nicely to this marketplace for variety meats and tallows, proteins, and hides. Let's go back and we will look at those weekly reports right here. Again, there are 6 weekly reports that we put out with FOB Plant and FOB Omaha. That makes 12. The comprehensive report and the specialty pork reports are our most recent reports. If you scroll down, you're going to see some additional voluntary reports that might be of interest. the byproduct drop value. There's retail pork feature activity. We already saw variety meats and tallow protein hides report, but then there's also the pasture raised pork report too. We'll go back to the website here. Okay, let's go look for some archived reports. This is a question that most folks are looking for. On the website, if you look right here under historical data, you're going to see a link to My Market News. My Market News is a new platform that market news in general for all the commodities has been moving to in the last few years. This platform helps us streamline our information and data so that it's more accessible to customers and more easily understood and readable. Reports are mostly in PDF or eventually will be all PDF, and it has or allows API capabilities that allows customers to run more analysis using business intelligence tools. But we're looking for archived reports. Down at the bottom, you're going to see search previous reports. And that's where we're ultimately going to go. But in order to search, we need to know the report title or the slug number. So if you don't know those things, you're going to go to the help screen up at the top, which will bring you to here. We're going to click on General Resources. And then we will scroll all the way down until we get to Livestock, Poultry, and Grain Market News. And the first line right there, Report Master List. Was last updated in August. They try to keep that current. You're going to download that Excel file, which I've got right here for you. And then you can put in some different filters to help you find exactly what you're looking for much more quickly. I know that the hog and pork reports are in the Des Moines, Iowa office. So I set it for there to begin with. And let's go look for the daily national negotiated pork FOB plant report. I've already found it right here for you. The title, exact title, is right here in column I. And then the new slug number for the My Market News system is right here in column G and F, which is 2498. But many of you are familiar with the legacy slug number of LMPK 602. So, but now that we've found that, let's go back to our search. Here, we're going to click right there. And in the slug ID field right here, we're going to put 2498. We're going to hit enter or apply. And then our search results come up on the right. If you click on those links, it'll take you to the report for the specific date that's listed, or we can go over here to the left side, which will take you to the report landing page, which is where we're going to go. Every report in My Market News has a landing page. And here you're going to find a description of the report and what it's about. You're going to find like reports up here in the upper right-hand corner. You're going to find additional information about API so that you can set that up later. And if you keep scrolling, you're going to find a link to the latest report, which should be yesterday afternoon. And here we go, 2020, right here. Let's look up something from August. We'll just go to August, and then we will wait, and here are all the August reports. If you're looking for something older that you can't find, please just reach out and we will help you navigate the website more clearly and help you find the report that you're looking for. Like I said, we are in a transition process, so we're doing that right now. Let's go back to the home page. All right, let's do a data pull, and we'll extract some data so we can put it into Excel and do some different things. We're going to go to Data Mart. This is where all the mandatory data is located. Here you can run several different queries. You can query from the beginning of reporting inception or just a specific window in time. You can also find additional information on how to set up an API. This is where you're going to find it for LMR. It's a new feature. But let's go look up some slaughter data. And I know that it's a daily swine report, so that's what I'm going to click. And here it is, the daily prior day slaughter report, or the 201. I'll click on that. You're going to get a bunch of criteria, and you're going to fill that in for what exactly you're looking for. Report date is the day that it's published, while reported for date is what the data represents. So I highly recommend doing reported for date. And let's do greater than September 1st. We'll set our little window here with the dates. Got it. I've got format choices. I've got XML, I've got HTML, I've got CSV and fixed width. I want CSV because I want to put it into Excel, and I want to do some graphing and run some filters. So here you've got more criteria that you can choose from. I'm not too picky today, so I'm just gonna take out a few things. I don't want the 14-day schedule either. And I'm ready to go. So then I will hit generate report, and a little pop-up window is gonna come up. And here's all of your data. And you're gonna click on each one separately, and it'll open up a CSV file for you that you can save down and filter or graph or whatever it is you're gonna do with it. Lastly, I want to share with you some additional mandatory information. So we're back on our homepage. If you go up to the top to rules and regulations, and we're going to find mandatory market reporting. Or scroll down, we want livestock mandatory reporting. Here you're going to find several different useful links. If you're looking for statute information, the Agricultural Marketing Act of 1946 is what you're going to look for. Maybe you're looking for something in the regulations. That's the Livestock Mandatory Reporting 7 CFR Part 59. There's information from the recent stakeholder meetings. Maybe you're looking for rulemaking, which is before mandatory actually came into play. But general information is also a good place to go. Here you're going to find additional information on those confidentiality guidelines we just talked about, or compliance processes. How do the audits work? How many times are plants audited? What all goes into that? The Meat Packers User Guide is also important. That has all the different reporting forms for all the different commodities, and it has every field that is required to be reported and what it should look like. You can also find information on freight rates for FOB Omaha, as well as the calculations involved. All right. And with that, I would just like to say thank you for your time and attention today. And please feel free to reach out to myself or the reporters if you have any questions or if you're looking for something whatsoever. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Jody. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Lakisha. If you go ahead and join us, we had a few questions come in, and appreciate your in-depth walkthrough of the USDA website. Hope that our participants find that very helpful. I know that our website can be a little bit cumbersome sometimes, but I think with you walking us through that, hopefully that will aid them in the future. And plus, remember, these recordings or these presentations will be recorded, and so they'll be available on our website, and you can go in and check those out. Or as Lakisha said, reach out to her personally, and she will help you in any way she can. So Lakisha, one of the questions that come in is the pork reports. You have a morning report and an afternoon report, and the morning report is not archived in DataMart. Why is that?
So when pork reporting became mandatory and it was set up to be similar to beef, very, very closely. And beef has always had that policy that the morning reports are not put into DataMart, and all of that data goes into the afternoon. I think the reason for that, not that I was around for this, but a big part of that was the fact that you're getting a full 24-hour window of all the data, and because a lot can happen from the morning report to the afternoon report. There can be some big swings on the volume that came in. Maybe it was a light volume in the morning, and then the afternoon there's a lot more volume, and so it averages out all of that data. But it's mostly just because when pork was set up, it was to mirror beef very closely as far as a lot of the reporting practices.
Okay. Good deal. One other question, Kim, is there a process to locate the volume of organic or antibiotic-free hogs slaughtered and the price paid for those types of hogs? Was that on one of the reports?
Well, no. So, I mean, we have some voluntary reports that have some of that information available. As far as how it gets handled for mandatory, it's just based on the definitions that are in there. So if there's a premium because the hogs were organic, that would be an other purchase arrangement, and that's where that data would go for a hog purchase. And then if that information, that premium would also be required to be reported on the Merits Premium report that comes out once a week. That's also referred to as the 250 report, or it lists all of those. Based on memory, I don't believe it's its own category, so it would be listed in other because there's not enough regular or frequent participation or information to make it stand on its own to meet the 370-20. So as far as some of the other data that would come from our voluntary reports, and that's where that information will come from. As far as pork reporting goes, we have a specialty pork report, but due to confidentiality, we're not able to break out all of those different subsets of data, and so it's everything all together, all the different types. So if you went to the weekly specialty report, which is newer, it's only a couple years old, you would find some information, but it'd be included with other information.
Okay. Good deal. Well, I sure appreciate it. So we have several questions that come in, and Lakisha, thank you so much for your time. And I'm going to go ahead and invite all the panelists to join us, and we'll kind of work our way through some of these questions. Remember, if you have any questions, please type those in the Q&A. Use the Q&A feature at the bottom on your Zoom toolbar. So one of the first questions that I want to ask is, I want to direct this question towards Neil. Neil, you've been a part of, the mandatory since the onset, since it began, and the Mandatory Reporting Act asks that, requires that the packers submit their hog purchases. And then in 2010, requires that they submit their wholesale cut sales. And so with that, have the packers, I know they're required to submit, has their position changed? Are they in favor were they in favor of that? And has their position changed as we've gone 21 years with this data and this amount of data that is available to all participants in the industry?
Jody, I guess I mean, as far as positions change, I don't know. I think everybody at the outset understood there was a need for more transparency, but this brings up a question, and I think Lakisha mentioned it. We have to understand that by law, packers that meet those criteria have to participate. And there was some, over time, there's some trepidation about how do you do that? How do you do it efficiently? Cost of doing it, things on this order. So I wouldn't say they were opposed. I think maybe apprehensive sometimes. And then with that, the other issue that went with it is that, and this didn't get stated, but AMS has the authority to audit all this data. So it is not I don't think it's a situation where people were opposed or in favor of processing, opposed or in favor on the outset. Now, I think when we got to mandatory wholesale pork, I think there's a lot of support from the packing and processing industry. And beyond the packing and processing industry, the customers, because there was a lot of questions as far, again, you get in a situation about the volumes recorded, and the more information, the better, and the changes brought about more reporting of more products. So I think that's the sense. It's kind of it was less a question of for or against and more of a, what does it mean and how's it going to impact me, particularly from a cost perspective. And there was some, there's some early concern on it, but the reverse side, and again, these people that report had to have IT changes. They had to go through a bunch of stuff, and there was some cost. But generally speaking, I think that at this juncture, I don't think the packing and processing industry is opposed to mandatory price report.
Okay. We have several questions that's come in, but I want to go back to Travis. Travis, we understand you kind of had some internet issues, and Neil, thank you for giving us that in-depth history of that. I'm sorry I didn't thank you before I moved on to talking to Travis, but we're having several questions come in, so I want to make sure we get to them because we're at about 20 after the hour. So Travis, one of the questions is, Of the NASS reports that are published, are there other NASS reports that producers can use to help them make marketing decisions other than the pig and quarterly report?
Yeah, Jody, thanks for the question. I apologize, everyone. An update came across my screen as Jody asked the question earlier in the webinar, and unfortunately, I don't have the ability to stop an update. So it took effect. So, and to the question on how NASS can assist producers with other reports along with the quarterly hogs and pigs report, NASS also provides the meat production disposition and income the end of April of every year, and that shows some data that would assist hog producers on the shipment of hogs and the death loss that occurs along with pig crop at the state level. In addition to that, you can also use the historic track records, livestock historical track records, which NASS releases mid-September typically, and that shows the how much the data changes over time from our reports that producers could see the quality of our data. In addition to those reports, NASS has been releasing the quarterly hogs and pigs methodology and quality measures report that lends an insight of the data quality that is being provided from the producers and their responses on a quarterly basis by state level. And I think that's very helpful for producers to see the impact it has and help them understand the importance of responding to NASS's surveys. To the more data we receive from producers in collaboration, it also provides a stronger data quality behind all the data and estimates on a state basis.
Okay, well, I appreciate it, Travis. I know NASS, they're partners, livestock and poultry, grain market news, and we all work together. And I'm sure that if anyone has any questions about any of the reports that NASS has, they could reach out to you, and you'd be more than glad to walk them through those reports. And okay, good deal. It looks like getting several questions here, and one of the questions is kind of stay on the topic of our LMR, so that we kind of stay on that topic, is how can the industry, submit comments on LMR, whether, producers, representatives, and then who do they need to submit those to? Neil, can you touch on that? Do they need to submit those to MPPC? Is there a formal process? And can you talk about that formal process of submitting comments?
At this juncture, my recommendation is somebody has a comment on it, call your congressman, particularly the ag staffer for your congressman to put forth your comments. MPPC goes through a process annually, and actually it'll be not too long till we'll be going through the next process for the next reauthorization. At this juncture, though, if you had a specific comment, question, or whatever, the best place to go is your congressman and your ag aide, particularly. Just a reminder that there's a few other things like a debt ceiling debate and some other infrastructure bill being debated. So there's a lot of things moving around right now in Congress. But my recommendation is go to your congressman and ask for the ag aide and make your comments known there.
Okay. Thank you, Neil. And yes, definitely reach out if you have comments, if you have concerns. Also, if you have questions about a particular report that's being published, and the information that's being published on that report, whether it's the a market report or the swine contract, reach out to those divisions directly and visit with them, visit with Lakisha with the market report, or Jennifer or Gary when it's regarding a report of Packers and Stockyards, and then Travis as well. This presentation, this webinar will be recorded, and it will be available on our website, hopefully by the end of the week. And so you can always refer back to that if you need their contact information. We've had several questions that come in. I will have to say there's some of those questions that, we'll have to reach out to you directly to answer those questions. And we're not able to answer those at this time. One question before I kind of wrap this thing up that I can talk about, and I'm going to direct this question towards Lakisha. Has it ever been considered to omit that morning purchase report, that 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock purchase report, I believe is what they may be talking about?
Well, I don't have a long history, like some of the folks on this call with mandatory hog reporting or pork reporting. I don't know if there's been discussions in the past. I would need to double check, but the hog reporting is heavily prescriptive in the statute itself. I know Neil talked about that earlier, and because it's so heavily prescriptive, I think it does mention that in there. So if there was to be an omission, you would have to go through process, which is what kind of Neil was talking about, with reauthorization and making changes. Have to go through comment period and other things, and have to have support and other measures taken. That's something that I can follow up on to be sure about, but I know it is mentioned in the statute specifically. So that would require a little bit more effort.
Okay, good deal. Well, thank you, Lakisha. And I know we have some questions that we were unable to get to, but for the sake of time, so we stay on time, we will capture those questions. And if you left your name with that question, we'll reach out to you directly, or somebody will reach out to you directly with the question. I want to thank all of the speakers this afternoon for joining us. We appreciate your expertise and this afternoon, and thank you all out there that participated in this series. Our goal is that all of you leave each of these sessions with a better understanding of these pork industry practices and processes stemming around LMR. I hope that we've accomplished that this afternoon. Take a moment to complete our participation survey. You can use the QR code you see here on your screen, and we'll share the link as well in a follow-up email. Your feedback is very important because it helps shape future outreach activities so that we can really do, we really do appreciate you taking the time to provide us your thoughts. One last reminder, this recording, this afternoon webinar will be available on the USDA website. The slide on shows the website there if you want to take that down, along with a copy of the presentation material. I hope you all join us next Tuesday, October 9th, as we continue our series with a look at LMR swine reports. Our presenters will explain upon LMR swine reports and address how data is reviewed and aggregated. CME Group will explain how LMR information is used in the CME Lean Hog Index. Representatives from the NPPC and Iowa State University will explore how to use LMR swine reports as a risk management tool. Following that, our final webinar in this pork LMR series will take place October 24th. Goodbye, everyone, and we'll see you back here same time, same place next Tuesday. Have a safe rest of your week.